We are in Hangout again. Um, Again, the purpose of the Hangout is to allow you to ask questions. Um, one of the fun and interesting things that's happened in the last week is Texas Instruments has been real excited about this class and all the success we've had. That they've approached us about what we're going to do next. And so we've been brainstorming, Yarabali and I, about different things we could do next and new labs that we would like to add. And the one that rose to the top multiple times over was a wireless lab. And so it turns out they're on top of the Launchpad, you can see their pins up here, and then we can purchase a booster pack which has wireless capabilities on it. And just like a Lab 15, our thinking is we would leave it as an option because, I don't know, maybe $40, $50 to buy this. But we would add a chapter on wireless techniques and then provide demonstrations of those wireless devices and an optional lab, just like we have the game as an optional lab in Lab 15. The second, along with these optional labs, is, as you knew, there were a number of projects that we built this semester and showed it to you, like the chat room, where we took two launch pads and we connected them up, and Yarabali and I chatted in our offices. That could be an optional lab. That would make a nice lab, connecting up two devices together. Then we had both the stepper motor and the DC, the stepper motor and the DC. So we need power. That's right. That'll be fun. We're going to play a game here. Don't go away. Talk amongst yourselves while we set this up. All right. So got power over there. Let's see if it works. Oh yeah, it does. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, put it. Yeah, there we go. Needed a little bit more. What I have here. Okay, that's fine. I'm just losing. That's all. What we have here is one of the games that was submitted. One of the games that was submitted is Lab 15, and it is Defender. And if I can, Jim may just plug me in, and I can almost reach it. I know. No, wait. Watch this. Watch this. Yeah, technical. There we go. Now I can. There we go. There we go. Hold this up to the camera. Further over. Yep. Don't get dizzy. All right. This is one of the games submitted by one of your fellow students. Interesting to note is because we prescribed where the D-Day was, where we prescribed where the slide pod and the Nokia. When the student made the game, I was actually able to download it onto my Launchpad system, which had those same specs, and now I can play it. So this is Defender. I take the reset buttons over here. I'm not very good at video games, especially upside down and backwards. All right, so here we are playing. There we go. Now where's my slide button? Up and down, up and down. Yes, you know. See, hear the sounds? Oh, I just died. Real fast. All right, here we go. I'm back. I'm back again. Yeah, so I'm trying to play it upside down and backwards, which is tough for a dyslexic like me. Okay. All right. So again, this is a demonstration of the process of Lab 15, and we've made some videos for that to happen. Okay. Rather than show you how poorly I play video games, I'm going to shut it off. All right. All right, we have a question. I would like to start I should read this, right, Prachi? Yeah. I'd like to start a company that manufactures scientific equipment in teaching and research. Guidance on how to locate software vendors that produce good quality software packages for embedded systems, applications that might be dedicated to a narrow functioning. Okay. Let me. I've been trying to start companies for a long time, and Janet asked this question, and Janet, it turns out, I think selling to teachers can be a difficult task, because whenever you try to sell something to a teacher, they want it for free, or if you want to sell it for a certain amount, they want to sell it for a lot less. And so unless you're willing to give it away, my advice is to go for the research, and then the second piece of advice is to look at the market. And so you look where's the world spending a lot of money. Drug testing, they spend a lot of money. Energy exploration for new energy. And so I would focus building devices that have a large impact in terms of the number of devices. Healthcare is good. Fitness is a good field to be in. All right, another thing. Question: how do you on software vendors? Software packages. Well, the actual application that you use in this class is made by ARM. It is obviously very expensive to buy the real one, but it is very high quality and very highly supported. The other major player for this ARM architecture is Code Composer Studio from Texas Instruments. Another I would choose a software vendor by the recommendations of other people using it, and in terms of how much support you have. Okay, well, good luck, Janet, on your venture of creating scientific instruments. Again, I would if you want to make money, I wouldn't go into teaching. Us teachers, all we like to do is give stuff away. All right. Next question. How different is the connected? Okay, so it turns out that Sky asked a wonderful question, and I came prepared to ask and to answer. And the question that Sky is asking is, what is the difference between these two boards? Okay, I'll get them up here in the same. Okay, so the one over here is the one you used in this class, which is upside down. Yes, it's upside down. This is a TIVA Launchpad, and here's a new one. Just came out a couple of months ago. Came out too early for us to use it after our class started. And so you asked the question, what's the difference? And so we'll hold them up side by side, and I can answer this in a funny way. The difference is $7. This one's $13. This one's $20. One of the fun things about the connected, it actually has a modification on the bottom to allow it to set male pins to go in a protoboard. Okay, what are the main differences? Twice as many pins. It's got port N and P and Q and R. It's got a lot more pins, essentially twice as many. It has two sets of places you can plug things into. As alluded to by Sky, it does have built-in Ethernet. This is actually very easy to use. If you get one of these, look over the summer for some starter code. That's just one of our plans for the summer, is to create starter code for this Ethernet. It has the same sort of things that you already have. It has a USB. It has CAN. It has timers. It has a lot more memory. Ooh, I forget the stats. But you have 32K of RAM. it has a lot more RAM than you have. You have a 256K of ROM. It has a lot more ROM. So again, it runs faster. Let's see, 120 megahertz, I think, versus 80. So it runs faster, more memory. Technically, it has really no more stuff than we've learned. It has the ports that are used in the exact same way. It has, it's got the same processor. Okay, Alex just looked it up for us. 256K of RAM and 1 megabyte of ROM. Okay, so 4 times. A lot more. Okay. More than we can use on our free version of the compiler. So anyway, it's so if you need a Launchpad with a lot of pins, this is an example. All right. So nice question, Sky. We were sort of anticipating that one. Abhishek asks the difference between a programmable logic controller and a microcontroller, and which one is preferred. I think this is a very good question, and from a engineering education, I would encourage you to learn both. Okay, so programmable logic controllers are essentially a way to create digital logic. So you prescribe your inputs, you prescribe your outputs, you prescribe the equations that convert input to output, and then you push the go button in a way just like you push the compile button, and it creates digital logic to solve that problem. And it turns out the same set of problems can be solved either on a microcontroller or on a digital logic. And I'll make the following sort of comparisons, how they're different. If your problem is configured such that it does many, many thousands of things in parallel, like you have 1,000 things to do and you can do them all in parallel, the program logic array allows you to actually run it and implement it in parallel. So just like you have a NOT gate over here and you have a NOT gate over there, and they're both being a NOT gate at the same time. Whereas in software with a single processor, we can have 2 NOT gates, but we become a NOT gate, we become a NOT gate. So if your problem is highly parallelizable, hundreds or thousands of things to do all at once, and let's go on the other side. What can a microcontroller do that programmable logic cannot do? And that is change. One of the biggest things about software is the knowledge and expectation it will change. So going from, and this change can occur dynamically. As you know, when you plug your mouse into your computer, it says, oh, there's a mouse. What should I do with it? And then it defines the software for running that mouse right at runtime when you've plugged it in. And so a lot of things are so dynamic that we don't know what they are when they're created. And that's something software can do much better than programmable logic. They're both in this space, embedded space. You will find, and there will be edX or MOOC courses on this. Most universities teach both microcontrollers and digital logic, and some actually do them both at the same time. The fancy word where a system that has both a microcontroller and programmable logic in the same platform is called system on a chip. Right now it's microcontrollers and digital. In the near future it'll be microcontrollers, digital, and analog, all systemed on one chip. All right, so that was is it possible to interface a CCD camera? Okay. With our board, yes. Okay, so the question, I got to scroll down and see what's from.
No, anonymous.
Anonymous question. Well, we answer anonymous questions. That's good. Okay, so the question is, can I interface a camera to the board? And how would I do that? One of the difficulties with cameras is they tend to need a lot of memory. And so this is actually one of the reasons you might use the other Launchpad. It has 256K of space. And so the difficulty with the camera isn't actually the interface. You can collect data on the microcontroller. Let's see. I gotta. What happens if I go to the web? If I go to the web, nothing. I can just go to the web. I'm going to look up the example code. There's an example code in the 3rd volume of the book. Don't go by the book, but let me look. Let me find it. So they're not in a messy. I'm just doing. Okay. So they still see me. All right. So I'm going to example codes. It's called something. It's called camera. Okay, that's really hard to find. Okay, fine. Okay, yeah, it's called camera. A very, very ingenious name. Okay, on my website, I don't know if you've noticed it, but if you Google Valvano and Google Valvano embedded or Google Valvano 4F120, whatever, you will find my website. And on my website, there's examples, example codes. And we have actually interfaced a camera to one of the first Cortexes that TI made, one of the Cortex M3 811s. And so there's an example project on that website called camera.c and camera.z. So yes, again, the difficulty with cameras are twofold. One is the memory. Interfacing is straightforward. Image processing could be difficult if you're trying to do a lot of pattern recognition. You may need a controller with more oomph in it. So either the Raspberry Pi or the Beagle Bone Black, those kind of things might. If you have to do a lot of image processing on it, you may want to step up to a higher processor. But if you're just trying to record data and send it along, yeah, there's plenty of power on the Launchpad to collect the data. All right. Next question. Next question. Good question. Very question. Yes. In the description of the modular design in Chapter 15, you mentioned the 3rd reason is portability. If we create modules for I/O devices, then we can isolate the rest of the system. We can isolate the rest of the system from the hardware details. Can you explain this? Oh, yes, of course. This is the question is motivation for modularity is the basic problem. And let me be the first to bring this. You may not like it, but most of the jobs that beginning engineers have are twofold. The first thing you do is testing, and then they work for a couple more years, and then you do more testing, and then they work for a couple more years, and they do more testing because testing is so important, and if it doesn't work, people get fired. The second thing they do is change, and so most of the engineering effort in the world isn't designing new things that have never been done before, but modifying existing ones. So let me give you. Let's go to the. To an example of what a change might be, where modularity will make it more portable. Okay. The first is, what if I don't have a Launchpad? Let's say I have a microcontroller from SD Microsystems or Freescale or Silicon Labs. Now, if I write my Nokia driver in such a way, and I layer it, so I have two. If you look at the Nokia driver, you'll see there are 2 layers. One has to do with the graphics, and if I can switch out the Texas Instruments Cortex with a Silicon Labs Cortex, I can keep most of that software, and I only have to change. I don't have to change my game at all. Let me show you another example. Let's say I don't like the Nokia, $10 or black and white, and we'd love to have some color. Okay, and now the question comes: is how hard? Okay, where's the on button? How hard is it to change your game from a Nokia to a color display? Okay? Now, if I abstract the images, do you remember how in Lab 15 you have something called a bump or BMP file, and that BM file is drawn on the screen? That's exactly how this one works. We process BMP files, and it's dumped onto the screen. So the fact that I've created a module that prints BMP really lets me run not the exact same program because there's a lot more pixels over here, but a very similar program. I can port the I/O device into another. I don't know if that answers your question, but there's engineering is all about change, and so the being able to change really will save us a lot of time. All right, good question. Oh, best way to debounce. Okay, the next question, what's the best way to debounce a switch in software? I'm trying to use a GPIO interrupt, but it's triggering multiple times every time I press it. Yeah, okay. I'm going to give you two answers to how to debounce a switch. There's the easy way, and then there's a hard way, okay? The easy way is don't interrupt on the switch, okay? Interrupt, take it. You know how many timers you got? Like 6 of them, okay? So take one. Remember, one of the things that happened in the starter file for Chapter 15 is we added you 4 more timers. We gave you 4 more timers, okay? And I want you to use it, okay? Pick one that you haven't used for anything else. And now I'm going to interrupt at a rate slower than the bounce rate, which is a couple of milliseconds, but faster than your little brother can push the button, okay? So let's say your little brother can push the button 20 times a second, 50 milliseconds. And the bounce is a couple of milliseconds. So in between those 2 times, say 10 or 20, say every 10 milliseconds, take a periodic interrupt. And then in that periodic interrupt, look to see if the button that you have is different than the last time. So how do you know what the button was the last time you had an interrupt? Well, you make a global variable and you store it in there. So every time the button, the actual button that you're looking at is different than it was 10 milliseconds ago, then you can register a change. And that way, if it bounces, you only get 1 change because the interrupt rate that's the easy way. The hard way, the disadvantage of the easy way is it can take up to 10 milliseconds for you to notice the button is pushed. So, you know, you go, hey, shoot, you push the button, and up to 10 milliseconds later, the software notices. So that's why it's not the best way, but it is the easiest. The other way to debounce a switch is just like you did, you trigger an interrupt on the edge, and then what you do is disarm that interrupt, arm a timer, and 10 milliseconds later, you run the timer interrupt, and at that point, you record what the value was, and then when you get the next edge, you can look at what it was previously, and so now you know what it would be now. So it takes 2 interrupts to do it really cool, and that is interrupt on the edge, disarm, set up. It's probably more complicated for me to tell you by hand waving. How about go with the easy one? Set up a periodic timer. It works great, and it's so easy. All right. Okay, so we got bounce. Switches do bounce, and so be careful. They do bounce. Okay. Oh yeah, Alex says one way to how Alex debounces a button isn't texting away. We just buy more expensive switches. Apparently, he didn't have an Italian mother. You know, my grandma wouldn't let me spend any money. She was okay. Debounce it in software is much cheaper and works just as well. Okay. Thank you for making the course happen. I really enjoyed it. I really like the effort put in by the instructors and the TAs. Yeah, Yarabali, as you know, is not here. He's packing to go to India. No, thank you. You're quite welcome. It was our pleasure. We were wildly more successful than we had any right to be. Chinmay and Prachi and Alex are here. I want to say thank you to them. Yeah. Prachi says. Well, Prachi says welcome. Chinmay says same. You know, welcome. And Alex says thank you. All right. And Yarabali, like I said, is packing up. He's going to teach this class in India, Indian students together with taking a bunch of UT students, University of Texas students to India, show them around. Okay, can I present these? Is there any new course coming up by you? Okay, well, just this week, Berkeley starting an embedded class. Their approach to embeddeds is very, very different than ours, and so we encourage you to try it out, see which one you like better. They're much more, the Berkeley group is a much more systems level, much more circles and squares and math, and it's a virtual lab, and the virtual lab was created by National Instruments. That's a cool company. But that's actually started yesterday, and I think it's only like 5 weeks long. So if you're going to do it, our plan is to go back and teach a couple of real classes because that's what pays the bills. And we're going to run this again in spring 2015. Like I said when I started, we're hoping to add wireless, and we're hoping to add a lot more optional optional labs, things that you could do like motors and that sort of thing. Okay. All right. And that'll be spring 2015. I just finished lab 14. However, I have a question. When I measure my oscilloscope voltage, PE1, I see a very stable signal, but keeping only the AC component with a capaciity in series. I figured 2. Oh boy, there's figures and.
Using the 50 Hz signal that's coming from the hum.
Okay, so you want to eliminate 50 Hertz hum. Software averaging? What would you? Grounding?
Median.
No, the hum is not median. 50 Hertz notch filter. Ooh, yeah, notch filter. Okay.
In software.
In software. Okay, so all right. If you're I'm going to go back to the internet, so I'm going to find a page for you to try. Okay, Alt tab. Okay, go back to internet. All right, so I'm going to go to notch filters. Where's my notch filter? It's going to be in 445M, I guess. Huh? Yeah, go back. 445M. Okay. Yeah, there we go. 60 Hertz notch. Okay. All right. So that's what I'm going to remember. Digital notch 60 Hertz .xl. All right. All right. So I'm going to close that. All right. Well, the question was asked is how to get rid of 50 Hertz. Well, you obviously live in France. We must be up late at night. We picked a time that was absolutely worst for France. It was like in the middle of the night there. We were trying to get some people in India up in the morning for picking this time. Okay, whatever way. This was not a. What I'm about ready to say is not a objective of this class, and that is to design a digital filter that will reject a particular frequency. Okay, but nevertheless, it's a fun thing to do. If you go back to my website, and then you click on 445M, EE445M. Chinmay's going to post it. Yeah, I know. Alex found the answer. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 445M, that's their third class, a real-time operating system class. That was the robots you might have seen videos of. Anyway, there's an Excel sheet called Digital Notch Filter 60 Hertz. Get that exactly right. Does that sound right? That sounds right. Digital.
Notch 60 Hertz.
Yeah, digital notch 60 Hertz .xls. That stands for Excel, and it's actually a very simple filter. We cut out 60 Hertz, and you want to cut out 50. All you have to do is change wherever we sampled at 240, you'll sample at 200. So if you sample at 200 and then essentially add up the current sample, the one you had 2 times ago, plus the filter output from 2 times ago, with some cool numbers, it completely removes 50 Hertz. It's called a notch filter. And so that Excel sheet shows you how to create that filter. The other ways to get rid of 60 hertz is to shield it. It's coming down the power line, so anything with a loop, twisted pair, would be reducing the amount of area in the wire. Will reduce the amount of coupling. Shielding, if you can put it in a box, metal box, that'll cut out the shielding. No, my favorite way is obviously the digital filter. You just have to sample at a multiple of the. If you sample 4 times, the math gets real easy. If you have 50 hertz, you sample at 200. That filter will work really, really well. Is there a way to fill in software? Yeah, I'm a retired computer engineering. Okay, thank you. Yeah, taught in variant. Yeah, we have a rule. He said thanks for teaching in an entertaining way. We have a rule. If it's not fun, we don't do it. So we only gave you the fun stuff. You know, all the boring math stuff. We left that out. Okay. All right. Oh boy, highest frequency square wave by one of the port pins. Okay, here's the answer. You want the PWM. Go to the PWM and bus click. It's like 4 times slower than the bus clock. So if you're running at 80 megahertz, you can create a 20 megahertz square wave using PWM. Now again, PWM is not one of those things we did in the class. But if you go back to that examples, website example files, and look for PWM. Of course, there were 2 launch pads that were out there for sale. This one that says Stellaris on it is the older one. It's an LM4F. It actually doesn't have the PWM on it. The other one, which is it looks just like it and is totally identical for this class, says TIVA, and that's a TM4C. That does have PWMs. Now you can create square waves with this, but you generally got to generate an interrupt for it and use the timers, and so you're much slower than about 4 times the bus frequency. So yeah, try it. You know, the fastest way to generate a square wave on these chips, on any of these chips, is the PWM, because that's what that is. It's a pulse. You can set both the frequency and the duty cycle right off the bus clock. It doesn't require any software whatsoever. It just jumps in. Okay. Here's a cool trick with the PWM. Okay, if you want to play around with the PWM and you have a capacitor, if you take a digital output, tie a resistor to it, and at the output of the resistor, put a capacitor to ground, and then oscillate it really fast and adjust the duty cycle, you actually get an analog signal out on top of that cap, which is a function of the duty cycle. That's called a digital to analog converter based on a pulse width modulated output. So that's a fun thing you can do with PWM, is actually create a DAC based on the pulse width. If you remember, we used in this class, we generated a PWM with SysTick. And that PWM was very slow. It was 100 hertz. And that allowed us to create an interrupt. We thought we'd make it easy to show it to you rather than teach you a whole new module. We did it with SysTick. All right. You're quite welcome. Yes. Again, the purpose of these, what we'd like to do is to get as many people through the class as possible, and so use the forums, ask a lot of questions. Can you talk about what? Okay, so I got another question. Can you talk a little bit about wireless control and Zigbees? You want to build a quadcopter, yeah. Okay, that can communicate with the ground and with each other and wish to. Okay. Wireless. There's a couple of things to think about. Distance. Zigbee isn't real far, so if you're going to be in the same room, you're going to run it. Zigbee has a distance 50 feet, something like that. whereas other RFs will have a longer distance. The second thing is speed. How much data you being transmitted per second? Zigbees are probably on the order of hundreds of thousand, 100,000, 50,000 bytes per second. Oh, we did a lab. 20,000 bytes per second? Yeah, I do remember the answer because we could pass audio through it. We made walkie-talkies. And so maybe we only passed 5,000. 5,000. I changed my mind again. 5,000 bytes per second. Zigbees are, but if you're sending control, you're sending commands, 5,000 bytes per second is enough. Whereas, as you know, 802.11b, now you got millions of bits per second being transmitted. I built a lot of quadcopters. Buy extra motors, it crashes. A lot. Yeah. Prachi's senior lab wasn't a quadcopter. It was one of those airplanes, but it was autonomous flight airplanes. And it was during demo time. She had this beautiful plane out there. And I says, Prachi, you never flew this plane. And she goes, well, there's, and then she had a video of it crashing. So she fessed up to it. So if you're going to do flight, make sure you buy extra parts because they crash. And this the third thing I'd say. The third thing I say about wireless is power, and that's the advantage of Zigbee. Zigbees are very, very low power, which is why they exist in the embedded space. Although most of your energy in a quadcopter is getting that thing off the ground. And the bigger you make the battery, the bigger you need the battery to get the batteries off the ground. So unless you're running off jet fuel, don't expect it to last very long. 20 minutes and then you got to recharge those batteries. The last thing I'd say about wireless is buy it. There's so many wireless kits out there. Wireless kits that would plug whether you got an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or a BeagleBone or a Launchpad, there are wireless devices. And so the thing that TI is coming out with a new one called CC3000. Yes, a CC3000 is going to be a wireless pack that plugs right onto here. The key is to make sure there's lots of software that already runs, so you don't have to invent everything from scratch up. So make sure there's stuff. We did not post our Zigbee software on the internet because we made it a lab, and so
So we don't cheat.
yeah. So there's a lot of Zigbee software in my office, but I did not post it on the internet because it's actually a lab in one of our classes. But it's fairly straightforward. You want to look in the EE445L, and then there's a lecture note on Zigbee, a couple of lecture notes on Zigbee. Very, very easy to use. It just uses a serial port. My understanding is that the TIVA Launchpad we are using is for learning and debug. Is that right? Is the equivalent board for a real application? So the question was asked is, what's the purpose of this $13 board? And what companies do is and Texas Instruments is just one of the many companies that do this, is they create sort of starter projects, starter boards that allow you to explore the space. So it's not just learning, but it's also exploration. Should I use a ST microsystem? Should I use a Texas Instruments? Should I use a Launchpad? A Cortex-M? Should I use a Cortex-A? So that's the purpose of it. But then once you go to product, what you do is you replace this board with your system. Okay, this chip up here is the debugger, and so for instance, you can actually use this Launchpad to program and debug another system that has this Cortex-M on it. That's what these 4 wires right here are. This is actually a debugger output that could be used to debug, download, program. On the other hand, if your real application has got less than 100, you're going to sell less than 100 of them. Yeah, bed this right in there. It's only $13. So Okay, so the next question, so is there equivalent, so the answer is there equivalent board for real application? No, that's what this is. This is real boards for real people. This is not an educational board. TI made this for real applications. And if you've got less than 100 sales, you're going to bed this. If you got more, you're going to lay it out and solder that chip on there. All right. Can I interface a screen? Okay. An Android screen. Android screen. No, I guess is a quick answer. And, he said, can I interface a screen? It all depends on the controller. As the number of pixels, let me show you the back side of. Let me show you the back side of a screen. We'll get this off without. Okay. I can't. Okay. This is a color screen with it's got touchpad on it. It's not very well made, so I wouldn't have said you buy this one. But on the back are lots of very large chips which handle the controller, and so it turns out if you buy a screen with the controller already made, then it's easy. But if you buy the screen without the controller, it's virtually impossible to interface one of these screens. The Nokia display that we did use in this class was one of the first screens on cell phones. That's why they're so cheap and so many of them. People didn't realize they wanted color, so they made a lot of them, and now we're having fun with them. This was fairly easy because it had the controller on it. So if you look at the screen, if you look at the back side of this Nokia the screen, there's both the LCD and the controller, the thing that does the XY raster scanning. And often when you pull something off an Android, off a phone, you don't get the controller. The controller is built onto the motherboard as part of the system. All right. We're coming up on 45 minutes. I'm going to say goodbye for tonight. All of our friends in France, go to bed. Sorry to make you stay up so late. We've had so much fun doing this. Okay, and so remember to ask lots of questions in the forums. Have fun with the Lab 15. It seems to work. We can download and run the games that the kids are posting now. We're going to go ahead and punch the button on letting you see. Well, you can already see their videos, but we're going to go ahead and punch the button and pretty soon let you download their games. Anyway, thank you very much for signing up. We've had a lot of fun with this class, and I'm going to get some work done. Anyway, it's nice to having you in our class. John Bovano signing out. Okay. See you on the internet. Stop.